The sun had barely risen, casting a pale orange glow over the empty streets. Lily sat in her car, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She glanced at the rearview mirror one last time, the familiar outline of her childhood home shrinking in the distance. It felt surreal. A week ago, she would have never imagined leaving. But here she was, driving away from everything she knew, leaving behind a life that had slowly, relentlessly, suffocated her. What if you suddenly walked away from everything you've ever known, only to be followed by 23 missed calls? Lily didn't know how many times she'd thought about that moment, the one where she would finally leave, pack up, and start over. For years, she had imagined driving off into the unknown, escaping the nagging voices in her head, the ones that told her she wasn't good enough, that she had to fix everyone else before she could think about herself. But when the moment finally came, it wasn't like she expected. It wasn't filled with relief or excitement. It was messy. It was terrifying. But it was necessary. The night before, she had written a note, barely legible from the tears that smeared the ink. "I'm sorry, but I can't stay anymore. I can't be what you need me to be." She left it on the kitchen counter where her mother would find it. She didn't think she would be able to tell them in person. The silence that followed her departure was deafening. She had thought about this for months, maybe even years. Her family had always been at the center of her world, but the more she gave, the more they demanded. Her mother's constant criticisms, her father's distant indifference, and Jake's betrayal, each piece of the puzzle had chipped away at her until there was almost nothing left. But Lily wasn't just running from them. She was running from the version of herself they'd created. The one who was always apologizing, always trying to fix things, always putting everyone else's needs first. Now, as she drove further away, a strange mixture of guilt and exhilaration settled in her chest. She'd done it. She'd finally walked away. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her leave. 23 missed calls. Her phone buzzed against the passenger seat. She knew who it was without looking. Her mother. The texts had already started flooding in before she'd even made it to the highway. "Where are you? Why are you doing this? Please call me, Lily. Please." But she hadn't answered. Not yet. Not when her heart was still pounding in her chest, still unsure if this was the right thing to do. She could almost hear her mother's voice in her head. "You can't leave. You're all we have." The guilt tried to choke her, tried to pull her back toward everything she thought she knew. But this was the hardest decision of her life, and she wasn't about to turn around now. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail. She felt a flicker of hesitation. Maybe it was Jake this time. Maybe he was apologizing, begging her to come back, to try again. The thought made her stomach twist. She had loved him once, deeply, but now he felt like a distant memory, a part of her past that no longer belonged in her future. She didn't listen to the voicemail. Not yet. It would be too much. The emotions she had bottled up for so long were raw, and she didn't want to deal with them, not now. Not when the world felt as empty and uncertain as it did. She needed time to breathe, to think. So she kept driving. Her thoughts drifted back to the night she'd made the decision. It had started like any other, except this time, something inside her had shifted. She'd been sitting in her childhood bedroom, staring at the framed photos on the wall, the smiling faces of a family she used to recognize. But now, those smiles felt foreign, like they belonged to strangers. It was then that she realized something that shook her to her core. Her family didn't need her the way they said they did. They needed someone to fix their problems, to be their emotional crutch, but not to be their daughter. Not to be herself. And that was when the plan took shape. She would leave. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay. Not when her identity was so tangled up in everyone else's expectations. Not when she had nothing left to give. The silence in her car was deafening as the city lights faded behind her. She drove for hours, the only company being the hum of the tires on the asphalt. It was strangely comforting, like the world outside was fading away, leaving her in a bubble of quiet that she had longed for. But the quiet also made her mind race. What would happen next? What was she supposed to do now? Her whole life had been spent catering to others' needs, filling the roles she was expected to play. Now she was free, but unsure. Lily glanced at the phone again. She had 23 missed calls, all from her mother, and a handful of messages from Sarah, her best friend, asking if she was okay. Sarah, unlike everyone else, had always been there, listening when Lily needed an ear, offering advice when Lily needed direction. But even Sarah didn't understand what it was like to be constantly tethered to a past that had become a weight on her chest. She wanted to talk to Sarah, to hear her voice, but the thought of explaining herself all over again made her stomach churn. Sarah had always told her to stand up for herself, to stop letting her family dictate her life. But would she still feel that way once she knew Lily had walked away for good? Would she judge her for it? "It's just you now, Lily," she whispered to herself, swallowing hard. No more running back. No more fixing things. No more second chances. This was her moment. Her life. But as the miles stretched out behind her, the emptiness began to creep in. What had she really left behind? Was it the right decision? She could almost hear her mother's voice again, accusing her of abandoning them. But no matter how loud the guilt screamed, Lily knew one thing. It was time to find her own voice. 23 missed calls, she muttered to herself, her grip tightening on the wheel. And I'm not going back. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Lily's childhood wasn't what most people would call normal. From the outside, it seemed like she had everything: a picture-perfect house in a quiet neighborhood, a family that always gathered around the dinner table, and a sense of security that only came from the illusion of stability. But if you looked closer, you'd see cracks in that shiny surface, cracks that Lily had spent most of her life trying to cover up. Growing up, Lily had always been the responsible one, the peacemaker, the fixer. Her younger brother, Ben, was the rebellious one, always testing boundaries and causing chaos. Their parents, Helen and Richard, were too caught up in their own problems to give Ben the attention he needed, and that was where Lily came in. She wasn't just the big sister. She was the emotional caretaker, the one who stepped in when things got tough. Whenever Ben messed up, whenever their parents fought, whenever the house felt like it was on the verge of falling apart, Lily would pick up the pieces. It was never fair, but Lily didn't know how to do anything else. Her father, Richard, was a quiet, distant man. He worked long hours as a lawyer and was rarely home. When he would retreat to his study, his presence barely more than a shadow in the house. He didn't speak much, especially not to Lily. When he did, it was to offer criticisms wrapped in cold logic. "You should have tried harder," he'd say when she brought home a B+ instead of an A. Or, "That's not the way to handle things, Lily," when she tried to solve a problem that had nothing to do with her. Her mother, Helen, was the opposite: loud, emotional, and constantly in a state of turmoil. She loved Lily, but that love was often suffocating. It wasn't the kind of love that lifted you up. It was the kind of love that made you feel like you could never be enough. Helen would look at Lily with pleading eyes, asking for support in ways that a daughter shouldn't have to give. "Lily, why can't you just help me with Ben?" she'd say, her voice tinged with desperation. Or, "I can't do this alone, I need you, sweetheart." From a young age, Lily had learned to put others before herself. She didn't know how to ask for what she needed because she was always too busy giving. And as she grew older, the weight of that responsibility became more than just a habit, it became a prison. When she was 16, she found herself alone in the kitchen, staring at her mother's tear-streaked face after another argument with Richard. Her mother's voice was quivering, pleading with Lily to tell her what was wrong with their marriage. "I just don't know if I can keep doing this, Lily. Can you fix this? Can you fix him?" But Lily couldn't fix anything. She wasn't a therapist. She wasn't a miracle worker. She was just a girl trying to survive in a house full of broken people. And when she couldn't solve the problem, when she couldn't make everything right, she'd retreat into herself, silent and withdrawn, hiding behind the walls she'd built over the years. It was the same story when she met Jake. He was different from the other guys in town, charming, confident, and full of dreams that seemed so big compared to her own. She was drawn to him, and for the first time, it felt like someone truly saw her, the real her, not just the caretaker. He was the escape she had longed for. He made her feel like she mattered, like she could be something more than just the girl who fixed things for everyone else. They had been inseparable in the beginning. The chemistry between them was undeniable. But as their relationship deepened, Jake's true colors started to show. He became possessive, critical, and, in moments of weakness, cruel. At first, Lily didn't recognize it as manipulation. She thought it was just part of love, the way he would get upset when she spent time with her friends or the way he'd demand more and more of her attention. He'd call her needy, fragile, too dependent. He'd criticize her every move, telling her she wasn't good enough, that she wasn't living up to his expectations. And somehow she believed him. But when the affair happened, when she found out he had been seeing someone else behind her back, that's when everything fell apart. He apologized, of course, profusely. He told her he was sorry, that it meant nothing, that it was a mistake. But Lily couldn't ignore the truth. She had been so wrapped up in the idea of saving him, of fixing what was broken, that she had forgotten to save herself. In the wake of that betrayal, Lily tried to find herself again, but it wasn't easy. She buried herself in work, in taking care of others, and in pretending everything was fine. But inside, she was hollow. Her relationship with her mother didn't improve either. Helen kept leaning on her, pulling her deeper into the cycle of emotional dependency, and it became clear to Lily that nothing would change unless she made a drastic decision. She couldn't keep being the fixer, the martyr. She couldn't keep living a life that wasn't hers to live. And then there was Ben. Ben had grown up, gotten into trouble with the law, and was always in and out of rehab. He had become a shadow of the rebellious kid he used to be. But no matter how hard he fell, her mother would turn to Lily for help, as if she could solve it all, as if Lily was the answer to every problem in the family. And Lily, out of habit, would try to fix him too. But it was never enough. Nothing was ever enough. It was all too much. And so she had left. But leaving didn't come without its own price. In fact, the moment she stepped out that door, a small part of her wondered if she had just abandoned the people who needed her most. She hated herself for that, hated the guilt that gnawed at her. But deep down, she knew she couldn't fix anyone anymore. Not her mother, not Jake, not Ben. She could only fix herself. The call she had left unanswered earlier from Sarah felt heavier now, like a reminder of the bridge she was burning. Sarah had always been the one person who understood her, the one person who didn't need her to be perfect. She had been Lily's friend for years, a constant in the whirlwind of her chaotic life. But even Sarah didn't know the depths of Lily's exhaustion. And now, as the miles stretched between them, Lily couldn't help but wonder if Sarah would ever understand why she had left. As the car hummed down the road, the guilt returned in full force, but Lily pushed it down. She was no longer the girl who fixed everyone else. She was someone new. She had to be. Lily's hands were still shaking when she pulled into a small motel on the outskirts of a town she couldn't even name. The neon sign buzzed faintly in the early morning haze, casting an eerie glow over the parking lot. She parked her car in the farthest corner, away from the few other vehicles, and turned off the engine. Silence. That was all she needed right now. Silence to sort through the mess inside her head. The weight of the world seemed to settle on her shoulders as she sat there, the seatbelt still fastened around her, her grip tight on the steering wheel. It felt as if the very air around her was pressing down, suffocating her with the reality of her decision. You left them, Lily. You left everything behind. For the first time since she'd driven away, she allowed herself to think about what she had actually done. She had walked out of her life. She had said goodbye to everything that had defined her, her family, her hometown, even Jake. But what came next? What did she want her life to be? She had no answers. Just a deep, unsettling emptiness that churned in her stomach. Her phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from her mother. Lily, where are you? We need to talk. You can't just leave like this. Please call me. I'm worried sick. Her heart twisted as the familiar, frantic tone of her mother's voice echoed in her mind. She should have expected this. Helen was never one to give up, never one to just let go. But this wasn't about her mother. It wasn't even about the guilt she felt from leaving. This was about Lily reclaiming herself, even if it meant hurting the people she loved. She was suddenly aware of how alone she felt. Sure, she had Sarah, her best friend since childhood. But even Sarah hadn't fully understood the depth of what she had been going through. The emotional weight of her family, the constant pull to take care of others while ignoring her own needs, had driven her to the edge. Lily had been stretched thin for too long, and the breaking point had come. She opened her phone, staring at the 23 missed calls, but she couldn't bring herself to listen to the voicemail. Instead, she let her thumb hover over Sarah's name, her finger itching to call her. But what would she say? That she had run away? That she was lost and confused? What would Sarah think of her now? Would she judge her for leaving so suddenly? For making a decision that felt so final? Before she could second-guess herself, another message came through, a text from Jake. We need to talk. I can't believe you left. You can't just walk out on everything. Call me. The pain from the betrayal came rushing back. She had thought she was over it, that she was strong enough to move on, but the reminder of Jake's manipulations stung more than she expected. He was part of the reason she was in this mess after all. He had made her feel small, unworthy, as though she could never live up to his expectations. And when she finally did, when she tried to find her own voice, he had crushed it. The temptation to call him, to hear his voice and maybe make things right, was almost overwhelming. But she knew better than to fall back into that trap. He didn't deserve her time, her energy, or her forgiveness, not after what he had done. She didn't need his apologies. She needed her own space, her own clarity. Her phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from her mother. A part of her wanted to answer it. She wanted to hear her mother's voice, to explain why she had left, to make her understand. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not when everything inside her was still a tangled mess of anger, hurt, and confusion. For the first time, she felt like she was caught between two worlds. On one side, there was the old Lily, the girl who always did what was expected of her, who always put everyone else's needs ahead of her own. On the other side, there was this new version of herself, the one who had taken control, who had finally made the choice to leave. But now she didn't know how to navigate this new life. She had no direction, no plan, just the open road ahead of her. As she sat in the car, staring out at the motel's flickering sign, a thought hit her. What if she couldn't escape? What if leaving didn't fix everything? What if the same old problems would follow her no matter how far she drove? The fear crept in again, the fear that she hadn't really escaped, that she hadn't really freed herself. What if she had made a mistake? What if running away only made things worse? The voice in her head started to grow louder, questioning everything she had done. She'd left everything she knew behind. She had walked away from a family that needed her. She had betrayed her own sense of duty. But then another voice, quieter and stronger, cut through the noise. No, this wasn't betrayal. This was survival. For years, she had been drowning, and now she was taking a breath. She was finally doing something for herself, even if it felt like the hardest thing in the world. The door to her car creaked as she opened it and stepped out into the cold morning air. The gravel crunched beneath her feet as she made her way to the motel lobby. She had no idea where she was going next, but she couldn't stay in that car, in that silence, any longer. She needed to keep moving. She had to. But as she walked into the lobby, her phone buzzed again. A text from her mother. "I know you're angry, but you can't just leave us. I need you. You're my daughter. We need you." Lily stopped in her tracks. The words hit her harder than she expected, like a punch to the gut. The guilt returned, more intense than before. But she shook it off, determined not to let it pull her back into the same toxic cycle. She had left for a reason. And no matter how hard it was, no matter how many times her heart broke, she had to stay gone. She was done fixing other people's problems. It was time for Lily to fix herself. The morning fog had begun to lift as Lily drove further into the unknown. The landscape had become unfamiliar, a blur of gray skies and wide-open roads, stretching out like an endless promise. She didn't have a destination. She didn't even have a plan. All she knew was that she couldn't go back, not yet. Maybe not ever. The idea of returning to the people she had left behind felt like an overwhelming weight on her chest, something that would suffocate her before she had a chance to breathe. The sun was barely peeking through the clouds when she passed a small, run-down diner off the side of the road. Her stomach growled, reminding her that the little coffee and granola bar she had eaten earlier that morning wasn't nearly enough to fuel her for the long drive ahead. Without thinking, she turned into the parking lot. The diner had a retro vibe, its faded red and white exterior a sign of its years of service to weary travelers and truck drivers. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee and bacon immediately hit her. The warm glow of yellow lights and the low hum of casual conversation brought a sense of comfort she hadn't realized she was craving. It was a small moment of normalcy in the chaos of her life, and she gratefully walked to the counter, slipping onto the nearest stool. The waitress, an older woman with graying hair and a smile that looked like it had seen more than its share of hard days, nodded at her. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice friendly but tired. Lily nodded, her throat dry from the hours of driving. She had forgotten how thirsty she was. "I'll take a cup of that," and she glanced at the menu above the counter, but she couldn't focus on any of the choices. She had no idea what she even felt like eating. Maybe just whatever's easiest. "Surprise me." The waitress gave her a knowing look before moving to the coffee pot, refilling Lily's mug without asking. The warmth spread through her as she took the first sip, grateful for the small comforts that life still had to offer. The diner felt safe, and in that moment, she realized just how much she needed to feel safe. Her phone buzzed again. She groaned inwardly, but couldn't ignore it. She fished it out of her bag and saw it was another message from Sarah. She hadn't replied to any of Sarah's texts or calls yet. "Lily, what's going on? I've been worried sick. Call me, please. I'm here for you. Always." The weight of the message hit her hard. She had pushed Sarah away without meaning to, without really understanding how much it would hurt both of them. Sarah had been her anchor, her best friend, the one person who had always been there through everything, even when it felt like the rest of the world had fallen apart. But Lily had run, and now, sitting alone in this diner, she realized how deeply she had hurt the people who cared about her. She glanced out the window, watching a semi-truck roar down the road. That was the thing about running away. It seemed like it would solve everything. Like the distance would make it all go away. But the longer she drove, the more she understood that it wasn't the distance that mattered. It was the emotional walls she had built around herself that needed to come down. The walls that she had convinced herself were necessary, but now felt like chains. She thought back to her mother's last text. "I need you. You're my daughter. We need you." The words burned into her mind, as if they were a constant reminder that no matter what, she couldn't escape the weight of family responsibility. She had spent so many years trying to fix things for them, to be the solution to every problem, and yet it never worked. Nothing had changed, but there was something else that had changed, something she couldn't ignore. For the first time in her life, she was trying to fix herself. She finished her coffee, took a deep breath, and set the cup down, the porcelain clinking softly against the counter. The waitress returned with a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast. It wasn't anything extraordinary, but it felt grounding, as if life, despite all its unpredictability, could still offer moments of peace in the simplest of things. "Thanks," Lily said with a soft smile, and the waitress gave her a smile in return before walking away to tend to another table. Lily dug into her food, trying to savor each bite, to hold on to the fleeting sense of normalcy, but her mind kept drifting back to the messages, to the decisions she had made, to the road ahead. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Jake. "We need to talk. I won't let you just leave me without an explanation. Call me now." The words caused a sharp pang in her chest, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. There was no more room for Jake in her life. He had taken so much from her already, and no matter how much it hurt, it was time to stop pretending that the relationship could ever be what it once was. As she finished her meal, her gaze lingered on the road outside. It felt like she was standing at a crossroads, one where every choice had weight, where every decision could alter the course of her life. The desire to keep running, to leave everything behind, was still there, but a part of her knew she couldn't outrun the past forever. The questions that had always lingered, about who she was, what she wanted, and what kind of person she would become, were waiting for her to face them head-on. She stood up, leaving money on the counter, and made her way back to the car. The small act of independence, the ability to take control of her own decisions, felt empowering. She wasn't running anymore. She was moving forward. But as she slid into the driver's seat, something in the back of her mind whispered the truth she had been avoiding. The hardest part of her journey wasn't the physical distance. It was the emotional distance she had to traverse. She started the car, and for the first time, she felt like she was truly free, not because of where she was going, but because she was finally letting go of the things that had held her back for so long. The road stretched before her, winding and uncertain, but Lily was ready to face whatever came next. The road had begun to stretch endlessly before her, with miles of barren landscape filling the horizon. Lily's mind raced, caught in a whirlwind of confusion and self-doubt. The music playing softly on the radio did little to drown out the relentless thoughts looping through her head. Every time she thought she was ready to make peace with her decision to leave, another voice, quiet but insistent, crept in, questioning if she had made the right choice. As the miles passed, the loneliness began to settle deeper into her bones. She didn't even know where she was heading, only that she had to keep moving. The small towns she passed blurred into one indistinguishable patchwork of road signs and gas stations. There was no sense of home, no sense of purpose. Only the road. The phone buzzed again. "Lily, please answer your phone. I'm trying to understand, but you're not making it easy." It was Sarah. Lily's heart constricted at the text. Sarah had always been there for her, always been the steady hand when things felt out of control. But this, what Lily had done, wasn't something Sarah would just understand. It wasn't something that could be easily fixed with a few kind words or comforting reassurances. Lily had always been the strong one, the one people turned to when they needed help. But now she was alone, and for the first time, she was struggling to see how she could continue without someone there to help her carry the weight of it all. It wasn't about the distance, the miles between her and her past. It was the emotional chasm she had created. The distance inside herself that seemed impossible to cross. She glanced at the phone. She had 24 missed calls and nearly as many unread texts. Most of them were from her mother. "Where are you, Lily? We're not the same without you. Please come home. The words, though meant with love, felt like a boulder dropping in the pit of her stomach. The guilt started to twist inside her again, the echo of her mother's voice bringing the familiar ache of responsibility. Her phone buzzed once more, the sound cutting through her thoughts like a knife. Jake. It wasn't just a text. It was a voice message. Lily hesitated for a moment, her finger hovering over the play button. Her breath caught in her throat as she pressed it. Jake's voice flooded the car, crackling through the speaker. Lily, his voice faltered, rough with emotion. I don't know what to say. You can't just walk away from everything we've built. You left me, but I never wanted you to go. Please, come back. I'll fix it. We can fix it. Lily's heart hammered in her chest. His words, so raw and vulnerable, made her want to reach out, to fix it all, to go back to what they had, but she knew she couldn't. She had already been down that road with him, with Jake, and it had led her to a place she didn't recognize anymore. It was too late. Tears welled in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away, refusing to let herself get swept up in his plea. She had already made her choice, and no matter how much it hurt, she couldn't turn back now. She switched off the voicemail and put the phone down on the passenger seat. The silence was almost suffocating. And then the real wave of emotion hit her. She pulled the car over to the side of the road, barely noticing the vast emptiness of the desert-like landscape around her. Her hands gripped the wheel tightly, and she couldn't stop herself from shaking. The tears flowed freely now, unchecked. The weight of it all, the loneliness, the guilt, the fear of the unknown, it crashed into her, and for a moment, she felt as if she might drown in it. She had thought that leaving would be the answer, that somehow it would give her the clarity she needed. But in reality, it only left her more lost than before. She had no idea who she was anymore. Was she still the daughter who had always tried to make everyone proud? Was she still the woman who once dreamed of building a life with Jake? Or had she become someone else entirely, someone she didn't even recognize in the rearview mirror? Her sobs shook her entire body as the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Leaving hadn't fixed anything. It hadn't made the pain go away. It hadn't brought her peace. All it had done was leave her facing the deepest questions of her life with no answers. She cried for what felt like hours, her emotions a mix of anger, confusion, sorrow, and regret. But in the midst of the storm, something inside her started to shift. A quiet, steady voice whispered from deep within, telling her that she had to face this, that she couldn't keep running forever. Lily took a deep breath, wiping her eyes as she steadied her hands on the wheel. She couldn't change the past, and she couldn't undo what had been done. But she still had a choice. Her phone buzzed again. Sarah's name lit up the screen. Lily hesitated, then answered. Lily? Sarah's voice was a balm for the chaos inside her. I've been trying to reach you. I don't know what's going on, but I need you to know something. Whatever's happening, we can figure it out together. You don't have to do this alone. Lily's chest tightened. She could hear the concern in Sarah's voice, the worry she had been trying to ignore. It wasn't about the decisions Lily had made. It was about the fact that she had cut herself off from everyone who loved her. Sarah, Lily's voice cracked as she tried to find the words. I don't know who I am anymore. I thought leaving would make it better, but it doesn't. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Sarah's voice was quiet when she finally spoke. Lily, I know you're struggling. But you're not alone. You never have to be alone. You just need to trust that you can find your way through this. I'm here. We'll figure it out, I promise. The words sank into her like a lifeline, steady and reassuring. Maybe she didn't have all the answers. Maybe she didn't even know what the next step was. But for the first time in days, Lily didn't feel like she was entirely adrift. There was something in Sarah's voice, something that reminded her of the strength she had always carried within herself, the strength she had been too afraid to embrace. Lily took a deep breath, her heart slowing as the tension eased. The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be quick. But it was hers. She was going to face it. And for the first time, she felt ready to walk toward whatever came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The road stretched ahead, winding and unpredictable. Lily could feel the weight of everything that had happened settle over her once again. She had been running, avoiding her feelings, avoiding the mess she had created. But in the few hours since her conversation with Sarah, something had begun to shift inside her. The walls she had built up, the walls that had kept everyone, including herself, out, were starting to crumble. It wasn't just about fixing the broken parts of her life. It wasn't even about trying to make amends with everyone she had hurt along the way. It was about learning to forgive herself. The sound of tires rolling over the pavement was the only noise in the car now, and the silence felt different than it had before. It wasn't oppressive. It wasn't an invitation for more tears. It was calm. It was a moment of peace, something she hadn't experienced in a long time. She had spent so much of her life thinking that her worth came from fixing things for other people, from being the person who made everything right. She had been so focused on what others needed that she had neglected what she needed herself. But for the first time in as long as she could remember, she wasn't looking to solve anyone else's problems. She wasn't trying to be perfect. She was simply trying to be okay with who she was, even if it meant accepting that she was flawed, and that it was okay to be flawed. Lily took another deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs as the miles passed. The soft hum of the engine beneath her was oddly soothing, and she found herself glancing at the road signs, marking each town that came into view. A few hours ago, this would have felt like a chore, just another reminder of her aimlessness. But now it felt like a journey, not one of escape, but of discovery. She wasn't running away anymore. She was moving forward, even if she wasn't sure exactly where that was going to lead her. The car slowed as she neared another small town, the kind that had a single blinking light and a few scattered stores. There was something welcoming about it, something simple that made Lily realize just how much she longed for something real, something grounded. She pulled into a small parking lot next to a bookstore she had noticed on the way in. Stepping out of the car, she felt the cool breeze against her skin. It was a welcome change from the stuffy air inside the car, and it made her feel more present, more in the moment. The bookstore's old wooden sign swayed gently in the wind, its paint chipped and faded from years of weather. But there was something comforting about its imperfection. Lily pushed open the door and stepped inside. The musty smell of old paper and leather-bound books hit her instantly, filling her lungs with the kind of nostalgia that always seemed to settle into her heart. She wandered down the aisles, her fingers brushing against the spines of books, as if searching for something to bring her peace. It wasn't that she expected to find any answers here, no book could solve what was inside her. But there was something about being surrounded by stories that felt comforting. It was as if, in these pages, there was the possibility of seeing herself reflected, of understanding what she was feeling, even if it was just for a moment. After a few minutes of wandering, she pulled a book off the shelf. It wasn't anything special, just a novel about a woman who had to rebuild her life after losing everything. But the title seemed to speak directly to her, The Road to Somewhere. Lily opened the first page and began reading. For the next hour, she lost herself in the story. Each word was like a small lifeline, helping her connect with something deeper inside. She read about the protagonist's struggles, her inner battles, and her ultimate realization that the road to finding herself wasn't one of perfection, but one of acceptance. By the time she finished the first chapter, Lily felt a sense of clarity. It wasn't that the book had given her all the answers, but it had helped her realize something important. It wasn't about fixing everything. It wasn't about getting everything right. It was about moving forward, even when the way seemed unclear, even when the future felt uncertain. She put the book back on the shelf, feeling lighter than she had when she walked in. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. Lily knew that she wasn't going to have everything figured out by tomorrow. She wasn't going to have all the answers, not right away. But she was ready to start again, to start healing, to rebuild the parts of herself that had been lost. As she left the bookstore and stepped back out into the cool air, her phone buzzed once more. She picked it up, half expecting another message from Jake or her mother. But this time, it was a notification from Sarah. "I'm so proud of you, Lily. I know this is hard, but you've got this. I'm here whenever you're ready." Lily smiled, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and love. It was a simple message, but it meant the world to her. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. With her hands steady on the wheel, she started the car and pulled back onto the road. She didn't know what was waiting for her down the path, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready to find out. The next morning brought a strange calm. Lily had slept in a small Airbnb just outside the town she'd found the bookstore in. The house was old but quiet, perched on the edge of a wooded area, surrounded by trees that swayed gently in the early morning breeze. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, a pocket of stillness tucked away from the noise of the world. She sat on the front porch with a mug of black coffee in her hands, staring out at the mist rising from the forest. The moment was peaceful, but her mind wouldn't settle. Sleep had come in fragments, dreams half-remembered, flashes of her parents' voices, Jake's angry texts, Sarah's concerned tone. The quiet was welcome, but it was also dangerous. In the stillness, the memories returned. One in particular, she was 16, sitting on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, knees pulled tight to her chest. Her mom was upstairs screaming at her father, and Lily had just failed her first big exam. She remembered how she couldn't tell anyone about it, how her mother would have blamed her for being distracted, and her father would have barely looked up from his phone. That was the moment she'd promised herself she'd never disappoint anyone again. Now, almost a decade later, that promise had become her prison. She sipped her coffee and let the memory pass, trying not to get pulled back into the vortex of guilt. But it wasn't just that moment, it was dozens of others. The way her mother used to lean on her like a crutch, needing Lily to be more like a partner than a daughter. The way Jake had convinced her that her dreams weren't realistic. The way she'd never said what she really felt. Until now. The sound of gravel crunching pulled her out of her thoughts. She stood up quickly, peering down the long driveway. A blue sedan was slowly approaching. Her heart jumped. For a second, she imagined it was her mom, or Jake, or worse, both. Her instincts screamed to run, to hide, but she forced herself to stay still, grounded. The car stopped. The door opened. It was Sarah. Lily blinked, unsure if it was real. Sarah stepped out, dressed in a hoodie and jeans, her face tight with worry but soft with relief when she saw Lily. "Hey," she said quietly, walking toward the porch. "You thought you could ghost me forever?" Lily let out a shaky breath and almost dropped the coffee mug. "How did you even find me?" "Shared locations." "You forgot to turn it off," Sarah said, holding up her phone. "Also, you forgot I'm persistent." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The space between them was heavy, full of everything unspoken, the panic, the abandonment, the worry. Then Lily dropped her head into her hands. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to shut you out. I couldn't do it anymore." "I know." Sarah sat beside her on the porch step, her voice steady. "I know why you left. You were carrying everything for everyone else. You just didn't know how to say enough." A tear slid down Lily's cheek. "But I hurt people. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even explain. I just left." "Sometimes," Sarah said softly, "you don't owe anyone an explanation when it's about survival. And sometimes, the people who really love you, They'll understand later. Even if they're hurt now. Lily wiped her face. What if they never do? Then they weren't really listening to you in the first place. They sat in silence for a while, watching the wind in the trees. For the first time since she'd left, Lily felt a weight lift, not completely, but enough to breathe. Enough to stop the spiral of shame. Sarah reached over and squeezed her hand. You don't have to go back. But you can't keep pretending you're fine, either. Lily nodded. I'm not fine. But I'm not broken either. No, Sarah said. You're just healing. And healing's messy. It doesn't look like Instagram quotes and yoga poses. Sometimes it looks like crying on a porch in sweatpants. That made Lily laugh, a real laugh, the kind she hadn't felt in weeks. Sarah smiled. There she is. Lily leaned her head against Sarah's shoulder. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. You don't need to know, Sarah replied. Just stay still long enough to hear yourself again. The words settled over Lily like a warm blanket. Maybe this was the beginning of something, not a return to the life she had left, but the creation of a new one. One that didn't revolve around being needed or being perfect. One that didn't require her to be small so others could feel big. She wasn't ready to go back. But maybe she was ready to stop running. That night, they stayed up talking. They ordered takeout and sat on the floor like they used to in college. Sarah told her about home, about the people asking questions, about her mom crying on the phone. She loves you, Lil. She just doesn't know how to let go of control. I know, Lily whispered. But I'm not her emotional crutch anymore. Sarah nodded. That's going to hurt her. But it'll save you. Before they went to sleep, Lily sat by the window and watched the moon rise over the trees. Tomorrow wouldn't be perfect. But tomorrow, for the first time, would be hers. Morning light spilled across the kitchen table, catching the dust in the air like soft snowflakes. Lily poured herself a second cup of coffee as Sarah shuffled in, hair tousled, wearing a faded t-shirt that read "Not a morning person." She grunted in acknowledgement before flopping into a chair across from Lily. You look weirdly calm, Sarah mumbled, eyeing her over the rim of her mug. I feel weirdly calm, Lily admitted. And also like I could cry at any moment. So, a balanced breakfast. Sarah smirked but didn't push. The last 24 hours had shifted something between them, no lectures, no expectations, just presence. And for Lily, that was everything. She had spent so much of her life being the good daughter, the understanding girlfriend, the one who held everything together even as she unraveled silently inside. But now, for the first time, she had permission to be unfinished. As the morning wore on, Sarah packed up her things to return home. She had work, obligations, a life back in the city. Lily hugged her tightly at the door. I'm not asking you to go back, Sarah said gently, but when you're ready, whatever ready means, just call. I'll be there. Lily nodded. Thank you for coming, for not judging. Sarah smiled. For the record, I always knew you'd hit your screw this moment eventually. I'm just glad you didn't get a face tattoo to mark it. They laughed, and then Sarah was gone, leaving Lily alone again, but not abandoned. She walked back inside, her fingers brushing the surface of the kitchen counter. The quiet now wasn't lonely. It was hers. Later that day, Lily sat down with her journal, a habit she'd lost somewhere between her mother's emotional demands and Jake's subtle put-downs. She hadn't written in months, maybe years. But today, the words came easier than expected. March 19th, I used to think being strong meant never letting anyone see me struggle. But maybe strength is saying, I'm not okay, and that's okay for now. Maybe I don't need to fix everything. Maybe I just need to listen to myself, really listen. The phone on the table buzzed. Another message from her mom. I don't understand why you did this, but I miss you. I know I wasn't easy to be around. I know I asked too much of you. Please call me. Lily read the message 3 times, each word scraping gently against her heart. She didn't reply, not yet, but for the first time, she didn't feel guilty about it. not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. The door wasn't closed forever, but she needed time. Space. In the afternoon, she went for a walk down the dirt path behind the Airbnb. Trees arched above her, tall and still, their shadows dancing across the trail. The deeper she went, the quieter it became. Her footsteps softened against the earth. No cars, no texts, no voices. Just breath and wind and birdsong. There was something sacred about being away from everything she thought had defined her. She wasn't Jake's girlfriend. She wasn't her mother's emotional therapist. She wasn't a disappointment or a savior. She was just Lily. She paused at a clearing, the light breaking through the trees in golden beams. And she let herself feel something she hadn't allowed in a long time. Grief. Not just over what had happened in the past few weeks, but years of accumulated grief. The childhood she hadn't truly had. The relationship she'd lost herself in. The version of her who thought love meant sacrifice, silence, and sting. She sat on the ground and cried. Not because she was broken, but because she was finally releasing everything she'd held in so tightly for so long. It wasn't weakness. It was truth. And the truth, though painful, was freeing. That evening, she called someone she hadn't spoken to in almost a year, her father. He answered after 3 rings. "Lily?" "Hi," she said quietly. There was a long pause. "I didn't expect to hear from you." "I know," she said. I needed space for a while. And I think I needed to say that to you directly." He sighed. "I guess I never made it easy for you to reach out." "You didn't," Lily said plainly. "But I'm not calling to blame you. I'm calling because I'm trying to understand where I go from here." "I don't know if I have any answers," he replied. "I'm not asking for answers," she said. "Just honesty." Another silence, but this one wasn't as heavy. He cleared his throat. "I wasn't the dad you needed. I see that now. I was distracted. With work, with your mom. I didn't realize how much you were carrying." Lily blinked at the admission. She had never heard her father say anything like that before. "I'm trying to change," he added. "If you ever want to talk more, really talk, I'd like that." "I'd like that too," Lily said softly. They ended the call a few minutes later, and for the first time in years, Lily didn't feel the cold distance between them. It was a thread, not a wall. Fragile, but real. She looked out the window at the darkening sky. The day had been quiet, but it had shifted something. She wasn't the same woman who had bolted down the highway days ago, lost and spiraling. She was still healing, still scared. But now she was also choosing. Choosing silence when needed. Choosing truth when ready. Choosing herself. It had been 9 days since Lily left. 9 days of silence, distance, reflection. 9 days without Jake. And then he showed up. She was standing in the kitchen, her hands submerged in a sink full of soapy water, when she saw his truck crawl slowly up the dirt road through the front window. Her stomach dropped. That familiar red Ford. The one she had driven in countless times, her hand resting on the center console, his voice low and full of promises he never quite kept. She dried her hands slowly, heart pounding. There had been no warning. No text. No call. Just him, now, stepping out of the truck and walking toward the porch. She opened the door before he could knock. "Jake." "Hey," he said. His voice was cautious. Too soft for him. His eyes scanned her face like he didn't know what version of her he'd find. She crossed her arms. "How did you know I was here?" He looked away. "Sarah." Of course. Sarah had never promised to keep her location secret forever. Lily didn't blame her. Part of her had known something like this was inevitable. Jake scratched the back of his neck. "You look different." "Yeah," she said, not smiling. "I am." They stood in silence for a beat. He shifted his weight. She stayed rooted. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice breaking a little. Lily hesitated, then stepped aside. 10 minutes. He walked in slowly, glancing around at the small cabin like it might explain the version of Lily standing in front of him now, clear-eyed, calmer, less apologetic. They sat at the table. The same table where she'd cried with Sarah. The same table where she had finally said, "I'm not broken, I'm healing." Jake looked tired. His jaw was tense, like he was bracing for something. Maybe her anger. Maybe the truth. "I've been calling," he said. "I know. I didn't know what else to do." "I don't think you ever really listened when I told you I wasn't okay," she said softly. "Not until I was already gone." He nodded slowly, guilt creeping into the corners of his face. "You're right. I thought I was helping, trying to keep things steady. But the truth is, I liked it better when you didn't push back. When you let me lead." Lily blinked. That was more honest than she expected. He looked down at his hands. "I didn't realize how much I expected you to carry. I thought love meant showing up with flowers when you were upset, fixing things when they got bad. I didn't realize I was part of the reason things kept getting bad." Lily's chest tightened. She remembered the arguments, how he'd always been ready with a solution, but never with understanding. How he'd deflect, charm, minimize. And how she'd bend, soften, stay. "I know I hurt you," he said. "But I need to ask, do you think there's any version of this where we start over?" Lily looked at him. Really looked at him. Jake was still Jake. He was trying now in his own way. But something in her had changed too deeply to go backward. "No," she said quietly. His shoulders sagged. He didn't argue. But she added, "I appreciate that you came. That you said the things I needed to hear 2 years ago." He met her eyes. "I didn't know how to love you the way you needed." "And I didn't know how to ask for it," she replied. They sat in silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. Just honest. After a while, Jake stood. "I'll go. I won't call again. I just needed to see you." To say it out loud. She nodded. "I'm glad you did." He opened the door, then turned back. "You're really different now." Lily exhaled. "I finally stopped performing." He smiled sadly, then walked out. She watched him go until the red truck disappeared down the road. Later, she sat on the porch with a notebook in her lap. The wind had picked up, stirring the trees, and the air smelled like pine and possibility. She wrote, "I didn't realize how much of myself I gave away until no one remembered who I was, especially me. But every time I say no, every time I draw a line, every time I choose quiet instead of chaos, I come home to myself a little more." There was still work to do. Conversations to have. Grief to hold. But she wasn't trying to fix it all anymore. She wasn't trying to hold together what wasn't meant to last. Jake's visit had brought closure, not the way love stories ended in movies, but the kind that real life offered. Honest, painful, necessary. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel cruel. She felt free. The next morning was quiet, peaceful in the way that follows a storm. Lily sipped her tea by the window, watching the golden light settle over the treetops. For the first time since she left, she didn't feel like a fugitive or a coward. She felt like someone choosing her life on purpose. The conversation with Jake lingered in her mind. It wasn't haunting her, it had cleared the air. She no longer replayed every word he said, wondering if she'd misunderstood, or if she could have fixed it. She no longer shouldered the entire weight of what went wrong. It was just over. Later that morning, she made a decision. She texted her mom. "Hi, Mom. I got your message. I'm not ready to come home, but I think I'm ready to talk. On my terms. Just me and you." The reply came 2 hours later. "Whenever you're ready, sweetheart. I'll be here." Lily stared at the screen, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from release. Her mother's reply wasn't manipulative. No guilt. Just space. That was new. She spent the day walking, journaling, listening to music she used to love. She rediscovered things herself, mostly in small pieces. The books she liked. The way she used to sing in the shower. Her spontaneous, dry humor. Her wild handwriting in the margins of old notebooks. None of it was earth-shattering. But it was real. And it was hers. That night, she finally made the call. Her mom answered immediately. "Lily? Hi." There was a pause. Then a shaky inhale. "I'm so glad you're okay." "I am," Lily said softly. "Now." "I wasn't, for a long time." Another pause. Then, "I know. And I think I knew it then, but I didn't want to see it. You were always the one holding everything together." I didn't realize how heavy that was. Tears pricked Lily's eyes. "It was never supposed to be my job to take care of you, Mom." "I know. I'm sorry. I leaned too hard on you. I turned you into a version of me. And I'm still learning how to undo that." Lily blinked, her breath catching. This wasn't the mother she grew up with. This was a woman who had been forced to look in the mirror while her daughter walked away and who chose to change instead of chase. "I'm not ready to come home," Lily said. "But I want to stay in contact." Small steps. Small steps, her mom repeated. "I can do that." Lily smiled, wiping a tear from her cheek. "Thank you." They talked for 20 minutes, nothing too deep, nothing triggering. Just honest. Her mom told her about the neighborhood cat that had started sneaking into their backyard. Lily laughed. It was the kind of small talk that felt safe now, without the weight of expectations. Without the performative closeness. After they hung up, Lily sat outside again, wrapped in a sweater, listening to the wind move through the trees. She didn't feel lighter, exactly, but she felt more solid. More rooted. And most of all, she felt like she had a voice again. In the days that followed, Lily built a routine. She cooked simple meals. She hiked every morning. She started freelance writing again, just a few articles at first, but it reminded her of what she loved. She even began drafting a memoir, not because she had a publishing deal or an audience, but because her story mattered. To her. She wrote the title across the first page. "They said I ruined their lives. I left. This morning, 23 missed calls." It wasn't about blame. It wasn't revenge. It was her reclaiming the narrative. And as she wrote, her words grew bolder. She described the way guilt had disguised itself as love. How people praised her for being strong, but only when her strength served them. How she disappeared behind everyone else's needs until she became a ghost in her own story. But not anymore. One afternoon, while sitting on the cabin porch, she got a text from Jake. She stared at it for a full minute before opening it. "Saw your article on Medium. I read it twice. You told the truth. I hope you keep going. No begging. No guilt. Just acknowledgement." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. That evening, Sarah FaceTimed her from her apartment back in the city, wine in one hand, blanket around her shoulders. "Okay, I'm just gonna say it," Sarah said. "You look luminous. Like, whatever you're doing out there. Keep doing it." Lily laughed. "You're the second person today to use the word glow." "I think it's just the lighting." "Nope. It's the I don't carry your drama anymore glow. It's real. And rare." They talked for an hour, joking, reflecting. It felt like friendship without obligation, just two people holding space for each other's growth. That night, Lily stood in the mirror and looked at herself. Really looked. She wasn't trying to fit into anyone's mold. She wasn't shrinking to make others feel better. She wasn't apologizing for taking up space. This was who she was without all the roles she used to perform. And for the first time, she liked what she saw. It had been exactly 1 month since Lily drove away from the only life she'd ever known. The old Lily, the one who apologized for everything, who smiled when she wanted to scream, who carried the weight of others just to earn a place in their hearts, she didn't live here anymore. She had left that version of herself behind on a stretch of highway somewhere between panic and clarity. And what remained was someone new. Still healing, still uncertain, but finally whole in the way that comes only from breaking. The cabin lease ended tomorrow. She had a few bags to pack, a few loose ends to tie. But she wasn't nervous. She wasn't even sad. She was ready. Not to go back, but to go forward on her own terms. Lily walked the trail one last time that morning, feeling the gravel crunch under her boots, her breath fogging in the cool spring air. The trees, tall, ancient, steady, seemed to nod at her as she passed, as if approving the change. She reached the clearing where she had once broken down in tears, letting grief pour out of her like it had waited years for release. Now she stood in the same spot and smiled. She didn't cry this time. Later that day, she sat at the kitchen table where so much of her story had shifted and opened her laptop. A draft of the memoir sat on her desktop, half finished. But she wasn't in a rush. She'd submit the first few chapters to her editor friend next week. Not because she needed to prove anything, but because stories like hers mattered. Because someone out there, right now, was sitting in a car with their hands shaking, wondering if they were crazy for leaving. And Lily wanted them to know. No, you're not crazy. You're just waking up. As the sun dipped low and spilled gold across the porch, her phone buzzed with a new voicemail from her mom. She let it play on speaker while folding her clothes. Hey, sweetheart. I was thinking about you today. I saw your old sketchbook in the attic. The one with the corner ripped off and the really weird robot drawings. It made me laugh. I guess I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. And I'm learning. Slowly, but I am. I'll always love you. And I'll be here when you're ready. No pressure. Just love. Lily paused, a shirt half folded in her hands. That voice, the same one that once made her feel small, now felt soft. Unarmed. She wouldn't return the call right away. And that was okay. Because love without pressure was love she could finally receive. Her phone buzzed again. A comment on her latest blog post. I've read your story 3 times now. It made me realize I'm not alone. Thank you for being brave enough to leave. Lily closed her eyes and breathed deep. That was why she left. Not to burn bridges, but to build herself. The next morning, she packed the last box into her trunk. The cabin behind her stood quiet and still, like it had simply been waiting for her to become who she was meant to be. She looked at it one last time and whispered, "Thank you," not just to the place, but to the journey. Driving away didn't feel like an escape anymore. It felt like an arrival. She turned on the radio, rolled down the windows, and drove. Not to someone. Not away from someone. Just onward. To whatever came next. And this time, the story would be hers. Entirely hers. The town hadn't changed much. The sidewalks still cracked in the same places, the same old diner still buzzed under flickering neon lights, and Mrs. Langley's hydrangeas were somehow always blooming, no matter the season. But Lily had changed. She stepped out of her car slowly, her boots crunching against gravel, and took a deep breath of the cool morning air. Her fingers trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the surreal weight of returning to the place she once thought she'd never see again. Not as the girl who left, but as the woman who had returned, on her own terms. She wasn't moving back. This wasn't some romanticized homecoming. She was here for one reason, to say goodbye properly. Her mom had invited her to lunch. Just the two of them. No expectations, no emotional ambushes, no guilt. That was the promise. And Lily, finally, believed her. She walked up to the door of her childhood home, now smaller, somehow, and knocked, even though she still knew exactly how the handle jiggled before it gave way. Her mom opened the door. There were lines on her face that hadn't been there before. Not just age, grief too. Maybe reflection. "Hi," her mom said softly. "Hi." They hugged briefly, lightly, and then just like that, Lily was inside. The kitchen still smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. The clock still ticked like a heartbeat above the stove, but now it felt more like a museum of the past, not a prison. They sat. Her mom had made tea and toast simple, safe. I read every word you wrote, her mother said, gently holding the mug in both hands. It hurt, but it helped. Lily nodded. It wasn't about blaming you. It was about seeing me. I know, her mom said. I just wish I'd seen you sooner. Silence filled the space between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was sacred. I'm not here to stay, Lily said after a moment. But I needed to come back just once to let go. The anger, the fear, the version of myself I became to survive here. Her mom blinked away tears. Whatever you need. Lily reached into her bag and pulled out a small, wrapped notebook. This was mine, from when I was 12. It's full of sketches and dreams I never told anyone about. Her mom unwrapped it slowly, reverently. I remember this. I thought you'd thrown it away. I almost did, Lily said. But I want you to have it now. So you'll remember who I was and how far I've come. They didn't hug again. They didn't need to. After lunch, Lily walked down Main Street by herself. She passed the bookstore, the church, the old school playground. And she felt light. Not because everything was perfect, but because she was no longer pretending. At the edge of town, she turned back for one last look. And then she got in her car and drove away, no longer running, no longer hiding. Just choosing, this time with peace. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?